Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Get ready, because we're diving into a massive, high-stakes drama unfolding right now in the global automotive industry. We're talking about the electric vehicle transition. But, this isn't just a story about cars. It's really a masterclass in corporate survival. It's about how visionary strategists are capitalizing on a massive shift, while some of the panicked legacy giants are absolutely scrambling just to keep the lights on. Today, we're going to see exactly how Renault saw the writing on the wall a couple of years ago and successfully rode the EV shockwave. Hopefully, you'll walk away from this one with some really surprising key insights. Let's get into it.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the European EV shockwave. Then, we'll break down Renault's four-pillar playbook. After that, we'll check out the 2026 data so far, look at the broader global shift, and finally, answer a really fascinating question: why India stays home.
All right, part one, the European EV shockwave.
So, to really understand what's happening, we have to look at the highly turbulent state of the global auto market today. Right now, there's a stark, undeniable divide between the winners and the losers. On one side, you've got the early movers, companies like Renault and Stellantis. Renault was the first major European manufacturer to act with real vision in this electric transition. Stellantis also made a brilliant, highly astute move by buying a stake in Leapmotor. That gave them access to a company that already knew how to build EVs at competitive costs, which essentially protected their future. But then, you have the German giants, brands you know well like Volkswagen, Porsche, Mercedes, and Audi. Despite having millionaire executives and massive resources, they made some incredibly myopic, rigid choices. They stayed anchored to traditional thermal engines way too long. And because they got caught off guard by the direction the market was clearly heading, they're now in this precipitous, panicked scramble to fix things. It's a total David versus Goliath dynamic, where agility and foresight are literally beating out sheer size.
Moving on to part two, Renault's four-pillar playbook.
Let's break down how this agility translates into actual corporate strategy. This master plan comes straight from Ivan Zagal, Renault's global sales and operations director. His core philosophy is surprisingly simple but fiercely executed. Prioritize the value of the sale over the volume. Basically, they aren't going to chase vanity sales numbers if it hurts their profit margins. Zagal built this whole thing on four specific pillars. Pillar number one is completely rethinking who is buying the cars. Renault made a conscious choice to prioritize everyday private buyers and drastically cut back on less profitable channels like corporate fleets or short-term rental companies.
And the scale of this shift is just wild. Across their top 5 European markets, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, and the UK, Renault now sells a massive 60% of its cars directly to private clients. That is nearly 18 percentage points higher than the industry average. So why does this matter? Well, fleets and rental companies demand huge, sweeping discounts. By going straight to you and me, the everyday consumer, Renault drastically bumps up the profit margin on every single car that leaves the lot.
Pillar 2 focuses heavily on the size of the vehicles they're pushing. Renault is actively scaling up sales in what's called the C segment. These are your medium to large vehicles. You see, a tiny compact car just doesn't leave a lot of room for profit. But a C-segment car, that's a different story. So they're utilizing larger, much more profitable vehicles across their brands. A great example is how they're expanding the Dacia lineup with bigger models, like the new Dacia Striker, way beyond just the usual Sandero or Duster, just to juice those margins.
Now, pillar number 3 is something absolutely crucial if you've ever bought a car: aggressively defending residual value. In plain English, that's protecting how much your car is actually worth on the used market 3 or 4 years down the road. And this is where it all clicks together. Right now, used Renaults are holding their value 4 to 13 percentage points higher than their European competitors. How do they pull that off? Actually, it ties perfectly back to pillar 1. Because Renault isn't dumping thousands of new cars into rental fleets, and because they refuse to slash prices with desperate promotions, they avoid flooding the used market with cheap inventory. They're artificially protecting the whole ecosystem. So the car you buy today holds its value beautifully for tomorrow.
Finally, we have Pillar 4, maintaining a super healthy order portfolio. At the end of June, Renault reported having 2.1 months of sales forecasts securely locked in as actual orders. This is the sweet spot. It means production perfectly matches actual market demand. There's no expensive, unsold inventory rotting away on a factory lot or dealership forecourt quietly burning through the company's cash reserves.
Which brings us to part 3, 2026, the data so far.
Okay, so that's the theory. But we are halfway through 2026 now. Is Ivan Siegel's four-pillar strategy actually working out in the real world? Overall, global sales are incredibly stable,
But the nuances in Europe are super interesting. The core Renault brand grew by 2.6%, and fully electric E-Tech models now make up over a quarter of those sales. Dacia had a slight dip of 8.7%, but hey, the Sandero is still Europe's top-selling car across all channels, and nearly a third of Dacias sold are now hybrids. But check out Alpine, a massive 67.6% explosion in growth, driven entirely by the battery-powered A290. They are now over 80% fully electric. When you put it all together, electrified models, meaning electric, hybrid, and plug-in, now make up a staggering 52% of the group's total European sales.
And there are some huge specific wins here too. The newly launched Renault 5, it's officially claimed the crown as the most successful B-segment electric vehicle in all Europe. Also, Renault saw an unexpected 11.7% surge in commercial vehicle sales. To put that into perspective, the broader European commercial market barely even recovered, growing just 2.1%. So Renault is vastly outperforming the rest of the market.
Let's zoom out a bit for part 4, the global shift.
Renault's vision definitely isn't confined to just Europe. When you look outside the continent, the growth numbers are just astronomical. Turkey is up over 15%, Mexico is up over 16%, and Morocco is thriving too. But look at India, an absolutely explosive 61.2% growth. Renault didn't do this by just tossing European cars on a boat and hoping for the best. They designed tailored, localized SUVs that precisely meet the needs and taste of the consumers in those exact regions.
And that leads right into our final section, part 5, why India stays home.
So all that explosive growth in India brings up a really counterintuitive question. If the Indian market is booming so aggressively and massive Indian automakers like Tata and Mahindra are incredibly successful and flush with cash, why aren't they exporting their passenger cars to Europe to go toe-to-toe with VW or Renault?
Well, the answer starts with this staggering number, nearly 5 million. That is how many new cars are sold in India every single year, and that number just keeps growing. The Indian domestic market isn't just a market, it's an immense, ruthless, and highly lucrative battlefield.
For local titans like Maruti Suzuki, Tata, and Mahindra, staying home is just the ultimate efficiency play. Think about the massive barriers to entry in Europe. First off, you've got incredibly rigid emission standards and those strict Euro NCAP crash test requirements. To meet those, Indian brands would have to pour massive fortunes into specific R&D just for Europe. Then there's the infrastructure side. Building a brand new network of dealerships, authorized workshops, and a sprawling spare parts logistics chain from absolute scratch, the cost is astronomical. So why would they risk all their capital and their high profit margins fighting for a tiny slice of a saturated, mature European market, especially when they can completely dominate a booming domestic market of 5 million buyers where they already know exactly what the consumer wants?
And that leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to wrap up today's explainer. If the biggest growing markets in the world are perfectly self-sustaining, are legacy European automakers truly ready for a future where global dominance doesn't actually require conquering Europe at all? The center of gravity in the automotive world is shifting fast, and as Renault's guidebook has shown us, only the agile and the visionary are going to thrive in it. Thank you so much for listening and learning with us today. I really hope these key insights have given you a totally new perspective on the electric vehicle transition and the changing global market. Until next time, stay curious.